Good morning, everyone. I'm Kate Slevin, Executive Vice President of Regional Plan Association. Thank you all so much for joining us and for taking an hour of your day to learn more about our priorities in 2026. Next slide, please. In case you don't know us, RPA is a nonprofit organization that works to improve quality of life for everyone in the New York City metropolitan area. And you can see our region here. Next slide. We conduct research, advocacy, and urban planning to improve mobility, provide stable and affordable housing, decarbonize our economy, ensure that we are resilient and prepared for the challenges of climate change. Next slide, please. RPA has a staff of about 30 that includes urban planners, researchers, advocates, designers, and communications professionals. We have an active and engaged board of directors, along with state committees who support our work. We all share a dedication to our region and for making it a more inclusive place. Vanessa Barrios, our DEI director, will be managing our Q&A later this morning. Today, you'll be hearing from our state leads for New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, Malin Mehta, Zoe Baldwin, and Pete Harrison, who are the on-the-ground members of our team. They work with a variety of partners, coalitions, and elected and agency leaders to implement our ideas and advance our mission. During the Q&A, we'll be joined by our research leads at RPA, Tiffany Ann Taylor, Moses Gates, Rob Freudenberg, and Rachel Weinberger. To open today, I want to talk a bit about why we work on the topics we do. As you can imagine, as a regional group with multi-issue areas, we are asked to get involved in many issues across the region, so we have criteria for what we work on. In order for RPA to get involved in an issue, it has to significantly advance our core values of equity, health, prosperity, and sustainability. It has to be in line with our recommendations in our regional plan, and our latest one is our fourth regional plan from 2017. It has to lead to long-term region-shaping outcomes, and it has to leverage short-term opportunities and attract support from key partners and decision makers. And finally, and maybe most importantly, fill a need that no other organization can address as well as RPA. Next slide, please. Before we talk about 2026, I want to reflect briefly on 2025. The past year has been tumultuous for our nation and region. Whether it was the general attack on DEI, attack on immigrant communities and communities of color, or attempted termination of transit and renewable energy projects, the past year has been difficult. As an urban planning organization that thinks long-term, we have stayed the course, providing stability and rationality in a time of uncertainty. We have redoubled our commitment to creating safe and vibrant communities for all people, and to our core values of equity, health, sustainability, and prosperity for everyone. Despite the challenges of last year, 2025 also about exciting changes at the local and state level. We have new leadership in New York City and Trenton, and it has been energizing to see Mayor Mamdani and Governor Sherrill embrace RPA priorities and appoint RPA board and state committee members to top posts. Thanks to the hard work of our team, our many organizational partners, our board and state committees, we managed to have quite a number of victories in 2025 that will actually improve livelihoods for our region's 23 million residents. For example, in Connecticut, we passed Connecticut's most ambitious housing package in a generation after years of work. It requires housing growth plans, encourages transit-oriented development, strengthens tenant protections, and reduces parking requirements statewide. Our research and advocacy helped build support for the passage of 3 ballot measures in New York City to streamline and encourage housing construction. And we fought off attacks to congestion pricing. We published reports tracking the results and coordinated the Congestion Pricing Now coalition with other partner organizations. And RPA even filed an amicus brief in support of the MTA's lawsuit to keep the program on, only one of the handful of times in the organization's history that we have done so. And in case you haven't heard, congestion pricing is working well to bring down traffic, clean the air, and provide safer streets. We help stave off work order stoppages for Empire Wind and Revolution Wind in the face of federal aggression. And we helped the MTA advance the Interborough Express, which will provide the first new transit line in Brooklyn since 1948, connecting up to Queens, which also hasn't had a new transit service in quite some time. This was an RPA idea, originally called the Triborough, and we're proud to be able to work with the MTA and the diverse communities along the corridor to get it built. We won changes to big highway expansion projects for the New Jersey Turnpike and the Cross Bronx Expressway. We have supported local coalitions, including the No Cross Bronx Expansion Coalition, to develop alternatives that reflect community desires and reduce harm. We've also won some smaller things, like New York's first free public observation deck since 1965. This was a recommendation of RPA's, and we're excited to see New Yorkers visit the David Dinkins Municipal Building for free city views next year. Now, moving into our regional priorities for this year. Next slide, please. First, we're going to continue to resist federal overreach and backsliding on energy and key transit projects. This includes New York City's congestion pricing program, Second Avenue Subway, Port Authority Bus Terminal, and the Gateway Program. In fact, today at 3:30, we'll be having an emergency webinar about Gateway. As many of you have heard, without action from the federal government, the construction on that project will stop tomorrow. So please come back at 3:30 and to join us and to hear how you can help. We will fight for the completion of the region's offshore wind projects, including Empire Wind and Sunrise Wind in New York and Revolution Wind in New Jersey, as well as for advancing renewables through the region and for grid investments that lead to affordability. And for all of these projects, and for the region in general, we will ensure that federal commitments are upheld and that the law is followed. We'll address the affordable housing crisis and promote transit-oriented development. The housing crisis continues to affect families throughout the region and threaten our global competitiveness. We're working for housing solutions at both the state and local levels. This includes loosening restrictive zoning, creating more housing options, and increasing tenant protections, and ensuring that we're building housing in the right places, in areas near public transit and in walkable communities. And Zoe, Mullen, and Pete will talk more about our specific priorities in each state in a few minutes. And finally, we're going to continue to integrate health equity into our planning, research, and advocacy work. And we have a national network called the Healthy Regions Planning Exchange that helps us and organizations in 10 cities across the country carry out this work. So thank you for joining us today. And with that, I will pass it over to Mullen.
Great, and thanks everyone for tuning in. As Kate mentioned, my name is Mullen Mehta. I am New York Director here at Regional Plan Association. And the priorities you see on this slide and across all the states are not exhaustive of what we're going to be working on this year, but they do cover a range of issues that cover our core issue areas and are especially important given the political landscape, both locally and nationally. Here in New York at the state level, as Kate alluded to, we're really keen on seeing reforms to the environmental review process, which has unfortunately become weaponized to prevent progress on sustainable housing, transit, and infrastructure projects. This is not about weakening environmental protections, but modernizing a process that too often is used to delay or block projects that are actually clearly aligned with our climate and housing goals. Governor Hochul discussed this as part of the executive budget, and we're working with Open New York to mobilize the Unlock New York's Future Coalition to try and pass meaningful reforms in this budget session. Additionally, on housing, as Kate mentioned, we're continuing to build off our transit-oriented development research and to build support for statewide legislative action. TOD really is one of the highest impact, lowest cost climate strategies that we have available. Yet across the state, transit stations are still surrounded by single family zoning, arbitrary parking mandates, and underutilized land. So we'd like to see a statewide TOD framework, especially since the state is already investing billions of dollars in our transit network. And we want to see those investments actually lead to more housing, more riders, and more sustainable communities everywhere. We're also working alongside many of our transit partners to push for better and more affordable bus service across the state. Thankfully, there's been a renewed focus on the importance of the bus network, particularly for working New Yorkers and communities that rely on transit the most. And as we as an organization, along with our allies, continue to push back on highway expansion projects like Route 17 upstate and the Cross Bronx and Brooklyn Queens expressways here in the city, we think it's really critical that we're simultaneously investing in real alternatives for how people get around, especially reliable, frequent bus service. Along those lines, we are also very focused on holding the state accountable to the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. The targets in the act were really hard won and intentionally ambitious. And, we can't really afford to be backsliding here, especially in the face of an increasingly unfriendly national landscape. So through our research and advocacy alongside our coalition partners, we're going to be working to keep New York on track and to call out gaps between our climate commitments and the actions that we take as a state. As Kay mentioned, we were also encouraged by the recent news giving another win to the offshore wind industry with Sunrise Wind approved to restart construction. But we really want to keep laying the groundwork to deliver energy and transmission projects more effectively. That means ensuring policy certainty, reducing bottlenecks, and strengthening coordination so that when conditions do improve, and hopefully they will improve in a few years, New York is ready to move quickly and keep industry partners eager to invest here. Turning to the city side, we're continuing to support progress on the Interborough Express to ensure that this long overdue connection between Brooklyn and Queens becomes a reality. IBX is really a transformational project for outer borough mobility, better job access, and for the city's long-term growth. And we think it's really critical to maintain momentum for that project. We're also continuing to advocate for expanding the tools in NYCHA's toolbox to address its really tremendous capital backlog. A few years ago, in research that we released, we advanced the idea of an expanded transferable development rights program that could generate billions of dollars for capital repairs. Given the ongoing uncertainty around federal support for public housing, we really think it's important now more than ever to move this idea forward and put some real scalable solutions on the table to help NYCHA get up to a state of good repair. We also want to help make homeownership more of a reality for New Yorkers. We have a report coming out soon that's looking at programmatic changes, ways we might increase subsidized homeownership development, and with a focus on communities that have historically had very limited homeownership opportunities, particularly those that have been locked out of wealth building for generations. So stay tuned for that report in the coming months. When it comes to addressing climate change here in the city, we will continue to support comprehensive resilience planning and dedicated funding to turn plans into real projects. With reductions in federal support, we think it's really critical to better coordinate citywide strategies with community-driven plans and improve coordination across municipal and state boundaries so resilience investments are actually deliverable. And this last item, is a broader bucket focused on how we use our streets and sidewalks to meet a wide range of needs via the city's streets master plan. More than almost any other public asset, our right-of-way shapes the daily experience New Yorkers have of the city. And this is where we can really make meaningful gains, whether it's improving bus speeds and reliability, better managing goods movement, expanding open streets and outdoor dining, building a safer bike network, or integrating resilience solutions into everyday infrastructure. So we'll be focusing on these items and many more. And locally, we did put out a very detailed mayoral priorities document late last year, which I encourage you all to take a look at. And next, I'll quickly review a few of the upcoming research projects that we have underway. So over the past year or so, we've been working with the small business community in New York City to better understand how climate change is affecting them and what challenges they face in preparing for, responding to, and recovering from climate-related disruptions. We're kind of on the tail end of that work, and we'll be releasing a report in the coming months identifying specific policies and programs that can better support the small business community's long-term resilience. I talked earlier about monitoring, putting out recommendations to deliver energy and transmission projects better. We're also working with the design community in New York to develop an urban design agenda for the future of New York City, which we anticipate releasing later this year. This work can be focused on helping advance equity, sustainability, and livability at a citywide scale. I did mention the homeownership work, but on housing more broadly, as Kate mentioned, we've really seen some great wins, including the passage of City of Yes for housing opportunity and last year's city charter amendments. We're going to continue to track implementation of these and identify improvements to make sure that these result in some tangible, measurable gains in affordable housing for New Yorkers. We'll also be looking into the impacts that new systems of advanced mobility and last mile goods movement are having on the region, what that means for congestion, safety, emissions, and quality of life. And lastly, here, a few years ago, we worked with the Renewable Rikers Coalition to produce a plan for transforming Rikers Island into a hub for green infrastructure once the jails are closed. And as the new administration gets underway, we're going to be releasing a new white paper to elevate those recommendations and bring some renewed focus to this long-term opportunity. So there's more to come, but for now, I will pass it to our VP for State Programs and Advocacy and New Jersey Director, Zoe Baldwin.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Again, my name is Zoe Baldwin, Vice President for State Programs here, and I also lead our New Jersey work. So, starting off with transportation, the state did enact a corporate transit fee about a year ago, which is fantastic, but it's really just not covering the agency's budget needs, and it also expires in 2028. So, as we head into our first budget season with the newly minted Governor Sherrill, our Fund NJ Transit Coalition we'll be launching a Fair Fares campaign in the next couple of weeks. And so, Fair Fares programs provide reduced fares for lower income riders and students, and most major transit systems have them. So, RPA actually published a paper on the national perspective, which has some really good comparisons, and we can drop that link in the chat. But this is especially important right now in New Jersey because we now have 3% fare increases every single year, which makes it a lot harder to get around the state. Um, and then also moving along, we're very excited to see that Governor Sherrill seems to be all in on expanding transit-oriented development, which is fantastic. The land plan released by NJ Transit last fall was an excellent kind of great, like a first jump into the market. And we're really excited to work with the administration to build on that success as they try to implement the policy and the land use visions that were part of that work. We also see the existing Transit Village program as kind of an underutilized catalyst, and are continuing our efforts to create kind of like a tier two or a Transit Village Plus program that would support communities that are trying to do the right thing. And so that's a nice segue to our next bullet. And as you can see here, we're continuing our legislative work to make it easier and more affordable to build housing in New Jersey. We work on housing individually and as part of the Greater Homes and Neighborhoods Coalition to advance the reforms you see here. And so, just to run through it quickly, stranded assets, which would facilitate the conversion of underutilized strip malls and office parks. We're working on statewide legislation to legalize accessory dwelling units, also known as back houses or garage apartments. And finally, we're continuing to beat the drum in support of reducing New Jersey's very, very outdated, overly inflated parking requirements, especially in the areas around transit stations. It really has been fits and starts with housing in New Jersey over the past couple of years, but we do have one major change in our favor, and that's Governor Sherrill. She's made housing and affordability one of her signature priorities, and while we all we know is that nothing is certain. It's really heartening to have kind of new energy in that fight. And hopefully, we can really get some of these meaningful housing reforms down the field or back on the track to make a TOD pun um, and see where we're going from there. And so, moving down the list, we're really excited to be working with State Senator Andrew Zwicker on legislation that would create kind of a NYSERDA for New Jersey. Right now, energy policy and procurement goes through either the Department of Environmental Protection or the Board of Public Utilities, neither of which is ideally structured for the kind of research, implementation, and oversight that our modern grid needs. For example, BPU focuses on rates and ratepayers, DEP on like the broad world of environmental stewardship, and it's clear that there's like a gap in this space. And so we look forward to continuing that collaboration to make the whole sector just stronger and more resilient. Moving down to the next bullet, one item from our fourth regional plan that we would really like to see is the Meadowlands designated as a climate park or wildlife preserve. It's one of the most identifiable regions in the state. It serves a critical role in resilience and is one of the largest contiguous tracts of urban open space in the entire Northeast. It's also a really rare wildland that's accessible, excuse me, by transit from New Jersey's largest cities. So the designation would help, the region actually adapt to climate change. It would help encourage ecotourism, and it would serve as a national model for urban resilience. And this is all, of course, very important. We have the World Cup coming up a few months, and we're going to have, kind of hordes of world visitors visiting the region. And it would be really great to kind of get that in place before the games begin. Moving along, we're also digging into freight in a more meaningful way in New Jersey and have begun engaging port operators, businesses, and department leads to kickstart a conversation on how we can maximize New Jersey's dense freight rail network. Similarly, well, not similarly, but on the other modal side of the spectrum, as Kate mentioned at the top, there was a reduction in the overall project size of that massive $16 billion expansion of the New Jersey Turnpike, exits 14A to C. And so while the portions right at the entrance to the Holland Tunnel were canceled in the waning hours of the Murphy administration, the Newark Bay Bridge design remains absolutely massive. It still doubles capacity and kind of just pushes the bottleneck down the line. So we're going to continue our work there to try to right size that project and make sure that we are really being thoughtful about how we're and where we're encouraging people to get around. And finally, there are a number of new development and resilience plans in New Jersey, including resilient environments and landscapes, in quotes, real rules, and the new state plan. And big hat tip to RPA CEO / New Jersey State Planning Chair Tom Wright, as well as the head of the Office of State Planning, Walter Lane, for bringing that across the finish line. But we're going to be monitoring the plans that we have in place to make sure that they're implemented efficiently and meaningfully. So that's going to be great. All right, next slide. And so this is an overview of some of the research that we're going to be advancing this year. The first bullet is actually almost ready for release and is the second in a two-part analysis, thanks to the FM Kirby Foundation. So that's going to be fantastic. We're really looking to see exactly what is the impact of these large-scale plans that New Jersey has, large scale plans and programs. I'm not sure how to describe Mount Laurel in that way, but what is the impact on development? And so we take looks at development patterns before those plans were implemented and after, and there's some really interesting data in there. So I hope you'll keep an eye out for that, and then check out part one already on the website. Moving along. So RPA has long been advocating to consolidate some of the functions of our transportation agencies, and if not a full merger, especially of NJ Transit and the New Jersey Turnpike Authority. Governor Sherrill has now appointed Chris Calori to head up both agencies, and so we're really excited to take a deeper dive into what that could look like and what benefits could really be garnered from having a shared both planning vision and funding structure for the two agencies. And so finally, building on our work to establish a unified Meadowlands Climate Preserve designation, we're also advancing a hybrid landscape around the complex, we are advancing a hybrid vision for landscape around the sports complex that kind of recenters the Meadowlands, recenters the wetlands, and integrates the built and natural systems to strengthen resilience. And that's a really exciting project. And it's much more of a visual, which I think is going to be great. That is going to be released in the late spring, just before the games, and hopefully can really help catalyze the region as it kind of walks onto the national stage. So that's all for New Jersey for now. Thank you so much. And I'm going to hand it off to our fantastic Connecticut director, Pete Harrison.
Thank you, Zoe. Hey, everybody. My name is Pete Harrison, and I am the Connecticut director. To give you a little bit of context of what's happening in Connecticut, we are in a gubernatorial election year. Governor Lamont is running for a third term. So things are, kind of heating up in terms of the political environment. Just like we did in New York and in New Jersey, we will be putting together a priority list for the next governor, and we'll be likely publishing that in the summer, and hope to do a similar bipartisan gubernatorial forum if we can make that happen. So keep looking for that. It has been a big year in 2025 for Connecticut. As Kate mentioned, we passed HB 8002. Folks that were following along, of course, know the backstory of this. This was a bill that was passed in the spring that Governor Lamont vetoed with quite a bit of pressure, very helpfully assisted by us hosting the National YIMBY Town Conference in New Haven in September. We were able to get this back and to a special session passed in November. And really over the next 3 years, there is quite a bit of implementation work at the state, regional, and local levels that we're going to be highly involved in. The most immediate step is the state will be putting together through the Office of Responsible Growth a housing assessments need that will put together, not unlike Fair Share in New Jersey, a housing total need for Connecticut and an affordable housing total need. We are actually on that special advisory committee for the Office of Responsible Growth that starts meeting next week. There is also a then process at the 9 councils of government that will receive those numbers and divide those out through their 9 regions across the state to their municipalities. That will be happening in 2027. We are also advising the Council of Housing Development that oversees that. They had their first meeting on Tuesday, and we are working on a brief, pretty substantive brief on what we think the guidelines should look like, both for the overall housing goals for the state and specifically the transit-oriented community aspect, Work, Live, Ride, which is what we were focusing on. That was part of the bill. And we're also working with our coalition partners on a pretty advanced strategy to start socializing and educating and training commissioners, first electmen, and mayors at the local level to start thinking about these housing growth plans. More immediately in this legislative session, which started in Connecticut yesterday, there will not be any major housing legislation. There will be some cleanup language for 8002. We're also going to be advocating strongly for some bonding for this incentive program fund that will be attached to this process. So we'll be monitoring that pretty closely. We are also through Pro Homes Connecticut, formerly known as Desegregate CT, are introducing a couple of bills that we're calling a starter and senior home package. Themes will sound familiar to folks on this call. We will be proposing some amendments to a statewide bill on ADUs that we passed in 2021. We've worked with LISC on basically a post-op of what that bill accomplished and what it didn't, making some recommendations on some additional zoning measures and some financing measures. We're also going to be more ambitious as well, and a number of other states are introduced what's kind of commonly known as the Golden Girls Bill, which is basically standardizing, making it easier for folks to rent homes or rent apartments in single family homes. And we also will be working with Home Builders Association on a couple of starter home incentive bills as well. We are also monitoring on the transportation side. We've alluded to this before in other calls, but we're starting a very big multi-year advocacy campaign, both on the governance and service delivery of our bus network in Connecticut, and also securing better funding through the Special Transportation Fund. In the immediate sense, in this short session, there will likely be a bill that will call to study alternative funding sources for the STF. This could be congestion pricing, it could be VMT user fees, other taxes, or perhaps some value capture on TOD projects. But the STF fund is effectively going to be insolvent in a few years, and there's a pretty big urgency just to maintain existing funding and system support. We're going to need additional funding. We want to think bigger than that and actually propose what would a better governance structure and service delivery look at the statewide level for buses. It's a very balkanized system, which I won't get into today, but we're very excited about that. We had a very productive meeting with the Transportation Committee co-chairs just this week, and plan to have some more updates on that. Another element that is also common for folks in the region, energy bills have been high. That's a major political issue going into the gubernatorial election in Connecticut. And one of the aspects that is likely to be A lightning rod is the public benefit charges part of the electricity bill. These are programs that DEEP runs in Connecticut for resiliency, efficiency, other investments that are really necessary for long-term decarbonization of the energy grid. We are really working pretty closely with state agencies and local advocates to defend those charges, anticipate a number of different bills to play whack-a-mole and to defend them. The governor just announced yesterday in his State of the State that he'll be doing a one-time rebate, which is very much a campaign engineering as opposed to a long-term solution. But we are working very close with the RPA E&E team on just defending these charges, talking about committing to the Connecticut's climate goals, and making sure we keep the energy transition going in Connecticut. That also involves, as has made headlines nationally, keeping the Revolution Wind project off the coast of Rhode Island up and running. This is the one that's closest to being completed. The Trump administration, of course, has been fighting that. There's been relatively good news on that front. So we are obviously monitoring that. There isn't much at the state level right now, but it is at the RPA level. We're making sure the federal government keeps its commitments, as Kate said. Transition over to the next slide, just to talk a little bit about some of the research projects we've got coming up. Most immediately, I mentioned we're having an ADU report coming out probably the end of this month in service of the legislative session. Most of you are probably familiar that during the Yimbitown conference in the fall, we released a first of 3 reports on current conditions for transit-oriented development in Connecticut. This was a statewide bus and rail overview of the 9% of land that is within a half-mile radius of rail or quarter-mile radius of bus. We are in the works following up on that. Similar to what we did in New Jersey and New York 2 years ago, we are going to be doing a scorecard of near, short, and long-term opportunities for the rail and rapid bus systems in Connecticut. That should be out probably the beginning of March. So we'll have likely a webinar and some more information about that. And further out, probably in the fall, we will be doing a similar report scoring short, mid, and long-term, but actually for the bus network in Connecticut. It's about 14,000 stops. We are narrowing that down. But this is a bit of a departure for what we've done in the other states that we're really excited about to emphasize the bus advocacy work that we're doing. We are also scoping out an extensive governance and funding research project for the bus network. We've got some interest in some local and some national funders on that, hoping to have more of a formal announcement of that in the next couple of months. But this will look at how do we reorganize the bus system in Connecticut across the very balkanized different transit districts, and how do we deliver better, faster, fairer service. And we have a lot of momentum going into this project. And then finally, just as we are in the other states, we are working closely with E&E and our environmental and climate partners on just the energy transition, offshore wind, solar, and other issues that are facing the grid in Connecticut, and anticipate having some more reports and advocacy around that as well. With that, I think I'll kick it over to Vanessa.
Thank you, Pete. All right. Well, welcome, everybody. My name is Vanessa Barrios. I am the Director of DEI Initiatives here at the Regional Plan Association. I will be herding some of the questions in the chat. I think so far we have one that is focused on New York and either transit and design. So Malin or Rachel or Tiffany, this is towards you. Over the next 10 years, tens of billions of dollars will be poured into the renovation/rebuilding of both Penn Station and the Port Authority. The connective tissues between these two hubs, 8th Avenue, is deplorable. The investments that are being made in these transit hubs should be leveraged to transform 8th Avenue between 33rd Street and 42nd Street. This avenue uses 1.1 million users a day, 100,000 jobs, and 3.5 million annual visitors. How can RPA ensure that this space will be part of RPA's recommendations in the urban design agenda and streets master plan?
Hi there. I'm Tiffany Ann Taylor. I'm the Vice President for Transportation. I'll take a slice of an answer for this question because you're really talking about intersectionality between transportation and urban design. So thank you for your very, very thoughtful question. I think quite honestly, the easy part of the answer is to keep talking about it, to be quite honest with you. Keep talking about it, keep bringing attention to it in a myriad of ways, whether it's public facing or behind closed doors as part of negotiations between agencies, continuing to educate folks like you and other practitioners in the field and elected officials about the importance of a lot of the things that you just said. It's not only important that we repair this infrastructure for the sake of for the sake of having a state of good repair, for our mobility in the region, but also making sure that the experience is pleasant, and that the opportunity to create new ways of thinking through urban design or new ways of connecting people or places that are designed that are open and airy and make people feel safe. All of those things are really important in addition to just the opportunity to make those connections via transit. But I invite my other colleagues to jump in and offer additional answers as well.
I just wanted to ensure you that that stretch of 8th Avenue, connecting Port Authority and Penn Station is something that's been on our radar for a while. And as we kind of develop the urban design agenda for New York City, I am, it is not just me developing this agenda, so I don't want to, speak out of turn, but it's something that you are not the first person to raise, and I think is definitely going to be a focus of our design work.
Good question. Thank you, Tiffany and Moses. Moving on to New Jersey. With the Port Authority and New Jersey within close proximity to the Turnpike extensions, what would be the alternative to extension expansion to address greater capacity?
Well, part of the issue is that that has not been studied, and that's part of our problem with the project as designed is they kind of Turnpike had a traffic problem, and the answer they came up with was more Turnpike, and that's kind of unsurprising. And so, what we really want to see them do is kind of what we were talking about before, where we hope to see these agencies either merge or work together. Part of what you need to do is see how much uh, relief you can get out of bolstering existing transit lines or creating new ones that might be able to pull off traffic. There's also demand management strategies that could be employed. And again, though, the biggest problem is that the options have not been looked at. This was the only option studied. And so what we really want to see is kind of that actual analysis of how do we fix this traffic problem, not just how do we make this roadway wider to make traffic theoretically move faster, because we all know on this side of the world that induced demand gives you only a little bit of relief, and that is a $16 billion project that's not even going to get you the traffic relief that you want. So that's part of the push and pull there. I hope that's helpful.
Zoe, if I can also add, I think it's also important for us to think about why are we using the turnpike for certain types of mobility. So when we start to think about how we move goods and other freights via truck, what are some of the other policies that we can institute from a regional perspective? Because it's not just on, the onus is not just on the state of New Jersey, but from a regional perspective, how can we move some of those goods by other means? Maybe we should think about things like more movement by water.
Thank you, Zoe and Tiffany. I'm going to move on to an environmental question from Catherine Hughes. What is the status of the USACE HATS? Several options include a regional comprehension plan. Rob.
Hey, I'll take that. Hi, everybody. Rob Freudenberg, Vice President for Energy and Environment. Thank you for that question. Not surprisingly, as you know, HATS is, it's a federal project. Just for those who don't know, it's the Harbor and Tributary Study. That's the comprehensive resilience plan for New York and New Jersey for the harbor region. That with the Trump administration kind of taking steps to scale back funding and scale back approaches, that very large $52 billion alternative has gone small in this administration. The plan has not been allocated funding to move forward at the rates it needs to be. And so what the Army Corps has been trying to do is advance smaller projects for consideration for funding. So there were a few recommended projects that they put forward in the Harlem River, in the Meadowlands, and on Staten Island. And an analysis of those projects are going to be released soon. It's very likely that maybe only one of them will move forward. So HATS has been, in a way, reduced to kind of a small project approach, at least during this administration. In the meantime, there are whispers that New York City is kind of filling the vacuum in some ways by approaching its own comprehensive approach to adaptation at the coast. And we will see if there's an approach for comprehensive planning for adaptation. Obviously, this is a huge challenge. We're not getting any safer from the impacts of climate change. And with a unfriendly federal government, we're kind of pushing the time out for when we do anything. Some see it as an opportunity to kind of reboot HATS and maybe see what some of the challenges were with it and try a new approach. And I think we're going to see all the different ways that we come out of this HATS hibernation, maybe with some more local approaches and possibly with different authority from the Corps. But there's a number of us working in partnership as a coalition to ensure that resilience is still comprehensively analyzed and looked at. Thanks for the question, Kat.
Rob, while I still have you, I wanted to ask another energy-focused question, specifically from a New Jersey perspective. Lisa Wood asks, how does RPA plan to move New Jersey towards a new state authority for energy? And how can other organizations support this?
It's a great question, and Zoe might have thoughts on this as well. She's really close to the heart of it. But as New Jersey moves to emulate what New York is doing with NYSERDA, I think it's a good opportunity to kind of see what's working about NYSERDA and see what's not working about NYSERDA, and have a better opportunity, a better program in New Jersey. What is the best of what works in New York, and how can we bring that to New Jersey? I think, as this bill moves along, getting the support from organizations and saying that this is something New Jersey needs would be critically important. Legislators need to hear that this is something that the state needs. It's hard to create a new entity. It's hard to justify that. But I think the justification is there, and voices who agree should be expressing that. And Zoe, I'll hand it to you for final thoughts.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that, except that this will be a legislative initiative. The legislature does actually need to pass a law to create a new entity like this. But I think that keeping an eye on the news, and we'll be writing about it as it progresses. And so, happy to engage that way. But thank you for weighing in on that. We're really excited to see that advancing.
Thanks, folks. We have a couple of really fun transportation-oriented questions. The first of which, it's like this is definitely something that's top of mind. And this is from an anonymous attendee. Does RPA have a stance on Mayor Mamdani's free bus proposal?
I'll take this one. Hi, everyone. So look, it's been really wonderful to see the attention to the bus system in New York. It's so much more comprehensive in terms of the neighborhoods it serves than the subway system, and it's not been given enough attention for way too long. So I think that's been really wonderful to see, and we really want to capitalize on it. We have for many years pushed for more affordable transit fares for people who need it, and for better bus service throughout the city. But when it comes to free buses, I think the hurdle that, we want to see overcome is how to replace that revenue. Many of us have been in big battles over transit funding. And so just to give, $1 billion of transit revenue away without having a really long-term plan to invest in the system is something we kind of want to talk more about and learn more about what the actual plans are before we take more of a position. But I will say we're 100% on board with more affordable transit, with faster bus service, and we are excited to work with the Madani administration to do anything possible to help in that regard. And Tiffany, I don't know if you want to add anything there.
You got it, Kate.
We have another transportation-oriented question, specifically on the IBX. And wait, where did that question go?
At the top.
Oh, here it is. Thank you. Are there still long-term plans to expand the IBX into the Bronx? And as a reminder, the RPA original recommendation from decades ago was called the Triborough, which linked the Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn.
Great, thank you. Great question. It is a question we get quite often. In our advocacy, since the project is born out of an idea of connecting all three boroughs, we definitely still support the idea of it advancing to the Bronx. What we learned from the MTA as part of this process is that it is a challenge to extend what's now the IBX into the Bronx because it starts to interfere with other rail infrastructure that's crossing as it relates to Amtrak and ultimately Metro North into the Bronx, crossing over from Queens. And so that would require additional infrastructure, add more time, and extend the budget as well to get that built. And so in the interim, I also just want to remind folks that there have been other important transit investments for the Bronx, like the bus network redesign that's happened. And also right now we're having Penn Access, at least Penn Access Phase 1, be built out as well, which is bringing more Metro North service to the Bronx. Right now, Metro North passes through it, but doesn't necessarily stop in certain neighborhoods. So an additional 3 or I think 4 stations will be added. And so RPA still continues to advocate for more diversity and options for the outer boroughs and particularly the Bronx. But for the MTA's perspective, at least right now, the interborough is only between 2 boroughs. But thanks for the question.
Thank you, Tiffany. This is also a transportation question, but it's from a regional perspective. Anonymous asks, there are pinch points between jurisdictions, and they're always a problem in our region, like Penn Station and the George Washington Bridge. Are we giving any thought to advocating for cleanup of these areas, improving wayfinding, etc.? If everyone's in charge, nobody's in charge, and users suffer. I love that mic drop at the end. It's true. Rachel.
Great question. I'll take it. I mean, that actually encapsulates part of the reason for RPA is that there are all these different jurisdictional boundaries, and we try to keep the regional perspective, obviously. So governance is one of our core areas. We don't have a specific program addressing the question that was raised, but we are constantly working with all of those organizations to increase communication and coordination and pushing for the best outcomes for the region.
All right, thank you, Rachel. Another question on transportation, specifically New Jersey. RPA is looking into transit expansion in New Jersey as a result. Is RPA looking into transit expansion in New Jersey as a result to Gateway? There's a potential for new capacity into New York City that can also connect more cities in New Jersey. Should we wait until the tunnel is open before we start thinking about the possibilities?
Given how long it takes us to build in and design infrastructure, it is never too early to start working on these issues. And I would also pose a counterfactual or counter question here. When is RPA not looking to expand transit capacity? Gateway aside, we love Gateway because it does that, but I know I'm being silly, but I really do want to highlight that projects like Second Ave Subway, Gateway, these are 100-year-old projects that have taken this long to get done, right? And so, RPA was the originator of the concept of the Hudson Bergen Light Rail, among other projects. And so we don't have that level of specific projects outlined, but we absolutely are working towards transit expansion. The problem for New Jersey is we can't fund the system that we have now. And so what we really need to do is kind of get that substrate fixed so that transit is sitting on like terra firma. So then it can kind of build out from there, because the danger right now is that the legislature and previous governors have had difficulty really committing the adequate finance to the agency. So for right now, kind of setting the floor and then getting stable and then hopefully looking to expand. But we are always looking for ways to expand the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. There's a really good one from Dylan Brown. I have done a lot of studies regarding climate resiliency in New York City. Given that the three major airports in the metro area are all within the floodplain, yeah, we know that too. What has there been any thought on the future of aviation transit and how it will continue into the future? Rob.
Hi, Dylan. Thanks for that question. I would love to see your research. We did research on this back in 2016 with our underwater report and reached the same conclusion. Our airports are at risk from long-term sea level rise, flooding, and compounded with storm surge. And it's different for each airport. LaGuardia probably faces the greatest threat soonest. All these airports have flood infrastructure and barriers that protect them. Newark Airport has kind of the greatest protection, which is the New Jersey Turnpike and the port that's in front of it. But you don't want to rely on the New Jersey Turnpike flooding to protect your airport. That's not a good long-term plan. So all of these airports will need to make adaptations in the future to keep operating. And again, the most urgent one to make changes is at LaGuardia. We're now at a point where the Port Authority and other agencies are starting to finally get capital plans that look at long-term risks like this. I think the challenge for the airports is going to be, how do you keep the airport running while adapting? And a particular problem with LaGuardia is you can only elevate the edge so high before the plane can't take off. So, we had suggested perhaps there's an opportunity to fill on top, do things where you can build on top of the airport, but that's going to cause significant disruption. So I think the real challenge here is, how do we keep the airports operating while adapting them? And I think we have to start getting that more into our capital plans and our plans for the future. But it's definitely a red flag that needs to be addressed. We agree.
Thanks, Rob. I think we have time for one more question before we wrap up. This is kind of actually for all of us. Do we think New York City will ever have another comprehensive plan?
Ooh, that is maybe the best question I have ever gotten in one of these webinars. I think the answer is, we really don't know. We have been proponents of comprehensive planning for a long time, just to have a better sense of how to guide the growth and development of the region. The incoming, or sorry, the new mayor has voiced support for the concept of comprehensive planning, if not, really proposed any details. It is a big project, and big projects can be difficult to get off the ground. If but On the other hand, the technology and technical ability to do a comprehensive plan in 2026 is very different from the mid 60s, which is the last time we tackled it. So we have some things going for us. We have some things that are going to make it really difficult. And this is a long way of saying we all really don't know.
And I'll just add that for a number of years we've been part of the Thriving Communities Coalition, which has been advocating for a comprehensive plan in New York City. And so, as Moses said, with there being some interest among city leadership, we're hoping to at least advance these conversations. And as has been talked about across all our issue areas, I think there is a need, especially in this moment, to think about ways we can look at citywide efforts and make our decision making a little more efficient based on limited resources. So we're hoping this is a moment to at least further the conversation and get us to a place where maybe it becomes a reality.
Thanks, Vaughn. Thanks, Moses. That's all the time we have for questions and answers. But RPA, we thank you so much for joining today's webinar. It's so easy to bury your head in the sand, especially in this day and age. So I'm really excited that we had so many people on today's webinar asking questions, getting engaged, because it's very clear that we have plenty of work underway here at RPA, but it's all hands on deck, and we definitely need your help. I recommend visiting rpa.org and follow us on our social media to share our work. And we urge you to stay informed and advocate for good planning recommendations locally, state level, overall. And also, if you represent an organization or company, you should join one of our coalitions. Hop onto our website to learn more. Furthermore, you can visit our membership website if you want to join and learn more about events, networking opportunities, and more. And if you haven't had enough of RPA today, here are some events on the horizon. As mentioned, we are holding an emergency webinar today at 3:30, where we will discuss the latest updates on the funding pause for the Hudson Tunnel project and the implications for the region. Later this month, we will gather at the Newark Museum for our annual New Jersey reception, where we will honor the Hudson County Executive Craig Guy, Audible, and the bipartisan Raritan Valley Valley Line Mayor's Alliance. Finally, please mark your calendars for the RPA Assembly, which is our flagship annual gathering, which convenes over 1,000 civic, public, and business leaders to tackle the region's most pressing issues. We will hold our virtual sessions at noon from Monday, April 27th through the April 30th. And our in-person convening will be on Friday, May 1st at Pier 60. And thank you. Have a great day.